Can you remember where the light reactions occur in the cell? The thylakoid membrane. I like to ask these questions on the exam. The light reactions happen in the thylakoid membrane. Before we get into the actual process of the light reactions, first we need to discuss some of the properties of light. Light acts differently. It acts as both a wave and a particle. A wave goes up and down like this, and the wavelength is the distance from the top of one wave to the top of the next wave. So this is my wavelength. The wavelength tells us something about the energy of light. So in the visible spectrum, the color red has a longer wavelength. The longer the wavelength, the lower the energy. Radio waves can be as long as hundreds of meters, so they have really low energy levels. The shorter the wavelength, the higher the energy. So purple and indigo have the shortest wavelengths, and they have the highest energy levels of the visible light spectra. UV, X-rays, and even gamma rays are much, much smaller and have even higher energy levels. But light can also act as a particle. This particle is called a photon. A photon is a certain packet of energy that a light particle emits. So the shorter the wavelength, the less energy is in a photon. The shorter a wavelength, the more energy is in a photon. The longer a wavelength, the lower the energy in a photon. Chloroplasts have specific photosynthetic pigments called chlorophyll. The most common pigments are chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. These are the pigments that actually absorb light and drive photosynthesis. The light that's absorbed is the light that you do not see. So think about it. What color are plants? Green, right? So chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B both reflect or transmit green so that you can see it. Neither one of them really absorbs much of the green light. The color you see is either reflected by the pigment or transmitted through the pigment. This is how the dyes work in our clothes and makeup as well. So when a pigment molecule, when light hits it and it bounces off, that's called reflected light. If light goes through a pigment, then that's called transmitted. Either way, the light that gets absorbed is the colors that you do not see in that pigment. We see lots of other colors in plants too, besides green. Think about when the leaves change in the fall to reds and oranges and browns. If you go to the grocery store and go to the produce area, you'll see lots of beautiful vegetables and fruits in all sorts of different colors. Each of these different colored plants has different pigment molecules. The different pigment molecules absorb different wavelengths of light and reflect different colors, giving them all of their different colors. The reason that leaves turn red and gold and orange and brown in the fall is because chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B break down in preparation for the winter. And as the chlorophyll's breaking down, you can actually see the other pigments that are in the leaf as well. Those pigments are always there, they're just usually masked by the chlorophyll. Now we'll investigate this process of capturing light energy a little bit more. Light is absorbed within a complex called a photosystem. When light strikes an electron, it is excited to a higher potential energy. This is shown on the graph on the left. When the photon of light hits the chlorophyll molecule, an electron gets excited because it absorbs some of that energy. Well, once its electron is excited, it can't stay there. What it's going to do is fall back down to its unexcited state. When it does this, it releases energy as light and heat. This can cause bioluminescence, so bacterial organisms that can glow use this excited electron state to luminesce or fluoresce. it also produces heat. This release of heat is one of the reasons your car gets hot when you leave it in the sun. The electrons of the inside of your car get excited by the solar energy and then fall back down. When they do, they release heat. But your car is covered by glass, so the glass in your car prevents the heat from escaping, and the inside of your car gets hotter and hotter. That's actually called the greenhouse effect. So what if instead of just falling down, we could harness the energy released by the photon and use it to do biological work? Well, so this is what photosystems do to use the energy from the sun. The image on the right shows a ray of sunlight exciting an electron of a chlorophyll molecule. But it doesn't just fall back down. When it does, it excites the next chlorophyll molecule. And when that one falls back down, it excites the next one, and the next one, and the next one, until eventually one of them will excite the special pair of chlorophyll molecules in the middle. This is called the reaction center. When this chlorophyll gets excited, it doesn't just fall back down. Instead, the electron moves up to a primary electron acceptor. This means that some other protein is going to take the electron and move it away. It's going to go down an electron transport chain and eventually end up with NADPH. So this means that that chlorophyll A in the middle there is going to lose an electron. Well, we need to replace that electron for it. Eventually, we're going to replace that electron with water. Water is split and oxygen is released, and the electrons from water go to the photosystem to replace the electrons that are lost. There are two photosystems in photosynthesis. They were named Photosystem 1 and Photosystem 2 based on the order that they were discovered by scientists. However, keep in mind, when we get to photosynthesis, that Photosystem 2 goes first and Photosystem 1 goes second. So it's a little backwards. Okay, before we go and look at the light reactions in an actual plant cell, we're going to use an analogy of these workers who work at Photosystem 2 and Photosystem 1 transporting electrons. Let's follow the flow of the electrons first, and then we'll do it in the real cell. The first step that happens is the electrons are taken from water and given to Photosystem 2. Remember, Photosystem 2 goes first. Here is the electron being given to Photosystem 2. Then the electron is excited. Then the electron is excited. You can see the photon is this worker down here at Photosystem 2, excites the electron from the bottom of the tower to the top of the tower. This represents raising the energy level, the potential energy of the electron. So this is the sun, and it excites the electron all the way to the top. When it gets to the top, it's accepted by a primary electron acceptor. That's this worker standing here. And eventually these electrons are passed down an electron transport chain. The electron transport chain is going to work exactly the same as the electron transport chain in cellular respiration. This means that electrons are going to be passed from one protein to the next protein. And as they do, they release a little bit of energy. That little bit of energy is going to move hydrogen ions from one side of the membrane to the other side of the membrane to move them against their concentration gradient, just like we did in cellular respiration. Eventually, we're going to have hydrogens moving through an enzyme called ATP synthase, and that's going to produce ATP. Back to the electron. When the electron gets to the end of the transport chain, so ATP synthase is made, the electron is eventually given to Photosystem 1. Remember, Photosystem 1 acts second. The photon of light is needed again, so light is going to come in and excite this electron a second time. the electron gets excited to an even higher energy state. Again, it gets accepted by a primary electron acceptor. This electron acceptor is going to be giving the electron to NADPH. Once we give the electron to NADPH, we will be done with the light reactions. And now the energy molecules that we've made, ATP and NADPH, can move out to the stroma and be used in the second part of photosynthesis. So this slide shows what this process really looks like on a thylakoid membrane, not just the picture of the workers. So let's follow the electrons as they move through this process. Start with water. We're going to start with water here. The water gets split into oxygen and hydrogen. The electrons get passed to the photosystem. Light comes in from the sun to the photosystem, and it's going to excite electrons in these chlorophyll molecules until eventually a chlorophyll A in the center gets excited to a higher energy state. It gets accepted by this primary electron acceptor and then eventually passed down the electron transport chain. As the electron is transported down this chain, hydrogen ions are moved across the membrane. We're going to move them from a low concentration of hydrogen ions to a high concentration in the center here, which means that they're going against the concentration gradient. That's why this requires energy. The energy comes from the electrons falling back down their energy gradient in order to move the hydrogen ions through. But these hydrogen ions are now cooped up in here. They're really close together. They want to diffuse back onto the outside where they have more space. Remember, diffusion is the passive movement of molecules and the tendency for them to spread out. So these hydrogen ion molecules are going to diffuse through ATP synthase, and this is what's going to make ATP. So now we've made the first energy molecule. Let's go back to the electron. We left the electron here at photosystem 1. So the electron at the end of the transport chain gets given to photosystem 1. Well, now we need light again because we don't have any energy. Light comes in and it excites the chlorophyll inside of photosystem 1. Eventually, it's going to excite the chlorophyll in the center and raise this electron up to a higher energy level. This is going to be given to the primary electron acceptor again. Now, the electron acceptor is going to give this electron to NADPH. So we're going to take NADP+, give it an electron in the form of hydrogen, and we're going to make NADPH. This is our second temporary energy molecule. Both of these molecules are already out in the stroma. Notice the stroma is out here on the outside of the thylakoid. This is exactly the location that the Calvin cycle is going to take place. So our energy is already set to go on to the next stage of photosynthesis.